The fluorescent light above the witness stand flickers once, then holds. I am sitting in a chair with a wooden back, and my hands are folded on the table in front of me. And across the room my mother is crying. Not the kind of crying that comes from grief, but the kind that comes from watching something you built collapse. My father has his jaw set in the way he always did when he believed that silence was the same as dignity. Between them, their attorney is shuffling papers. He has been shuffling those same papers for 11 minutes. On the table in front of me is a small tin box, the kind that once held Danish butter cookies, the kind with the blue lid and the embossed sailing ship. It is dented on one corner. It has been in my possession for 4 years, 3 months, and 6 days. Nobody in this room knows what is inside it. Not yet. Welcome to Calm Revenge Tales. I'm your narrator. This channel exists for the people who waited, who did things the right way, who were told that patience was weakness, right up until patience became the instrument of justice. If that sounds like your story, subscribe. Stay with me. Let's see this through together. My name is Theodora Vance, and I am a licensed home health aide, and I was 22 years old the morning I sat in that courtroom. I had been working since I was 15, babysitting, then a diner on Route 9, then, when I got certified, caring for the elderly in their own homes. I had a car I paid off myself, a shared apartment with 2 roommates I actually liked, and a savings account with just under $8,000 in it, which I had built by making lunch every day instead of buying it. I did not have help with any of this. My grandmother, Estelle Vance Gran, was not overlooked by the world in any grand sense. She was overlooked by her own son. My father, Gerald Vance, had put her in a facility on the east side of town when I was 13, not because she couldn't manage. She absolutely could, but because managing her had become inconvenient. He visited on holidays. He kept her out of family photographs. When people at church asked after her, he said she was comfortable, which is what people say when they mean the subject is closed. I drove to see Gran every Tuesday and every Saturday. I brought her a specific brand of rye crackers she liked, the ones with the black caraway seeds, and I sat with her for 3 hours, and we talked about everything. She had opinions about architecture. She thought most modern buildings looked like they were embarrassed to exist. She made me laugh every single time. The facility staff called her difficult. I called her precise. The invitation came in the form of my mother's handwriting on a card with a gold border, which arrived 6 weeks before my 18th birthday. It read, "We are planning a dinner to celebrate your milestone. We would love for you to be there. Please respond by the 15th. My parents lived 22 minutes away. They had not called me in 4 months. The conditions, as my mother explained them on the phone when I called to respond, were simple. The dinner would be at their house, it would be family only, and Gran would not be in attendance because, as my mother put it, the energy gets complicated when she's there." I asked what that meant. My mother said, "You know what that means, Teddy." I did know. Gran had a habit of saying true things in front of people who preferred otherwise. I almost said no. I had the no sitting in my throat, round and ready. But my mother said, almost as an afterthought, "Your grandfather's watch is here. We thought you might want it on your birthday." My grandfather had died when I was 11. I had loved him with the particular ferocity of a child who recognizes a safe person. I said I would come. What I did not know, what I would not learn until months later, was that the dinner had a second purpose. My parents had already consulted an attorney. They had already discussed the trust. The thing about foreshadowing is that it's only visible looking backward. The card with the gold border is still in my memory. The word milestone, I now understand, was doing a great deal of work. The dinner was on a Saturday. I remember the temperature, 41 degrees, because I had walked from my car without a coat, and I could feel the cold settling into the back of my neck like a hand. My Aunt Marlene was there, and my Uncle Pete, and their adult son Cresswell, who had always been the kind of person who laughed slightly too late at jokes to seem like he understood them. My mother had made a roast. It smelled good. The table was set with the good china, the kind that usually only appeared at Christmas. Midway through the meal, my father cleared his throat and said he had something he wanted to discuss. He said it was about Gran. He said the facility had raised concerns. That Gran had been making decisions that the staff felt were inconsistent with her capacity. That he had consulted with a doctor, not her doctor, a different one, and that he was exploring options that would allow the family to make decisions on her behalf. I set my fork down. I said, "What does that mean, Dad?" He said it meant conservatorship. It meant that Gran's finances, which included the trust she had established for me upon my 18th birthday, $212,000, accumulated over 40 years, from a woman who had never earned more than $31,000 in a single year, would be managed by the family. By him. I said. She doesn't need a conservator. I see her twice a week. My father said, "You're a child, Theodora." My mother said, "We just want to make sure everything is handled correctly." Marlene said nothing. Pete said nothing. Cresswell was looking at his plate. Then my father said the words. He said, "We've already filed the petition." I pushed my chair back from the table. I said, calmly and at a normal volume, that this was Gran's money and Gran's trust, and that I would be speaking with a lawyer on Monday morning. My father said if I walked out, I would not be welcome back. I looked at my Uncle Pete, who was the only person in the room I had ever trusted to be honest. His jaw moved. Just once. And then he looked away. I took my coat from the hook by the door. I left. That was my choice. I want to be clear about that. I walked away from the table, from the roast, from the watch that was still sitting in my father's study, from 22 minutes of proximity that had never actually been closeness. I walked away because staying would have been the capitulation, and I had never confused presence with safety. Monday morning I was in the office of an attorney named Rutherford Osei, who charged $215 an hour, and did not waste a minute of it. He was 63 years old, and had the particular stillness of someone who had heard everything. I told him what my father had filed. I told him about the trust. He listened without interrupting. Then he said, "How old is your grandmother?" I said, 79. He said, "And does she have a doctor of her own who has assessed her capacity recently?" I said, "Yes. Dr. Anaya Krishnamurti. She saw Gran 6 weeks ago." He said, "Good. Call her office this afternoon." I called. Dr. Krishnamurti's assessment, dated 43 days before my father's filing, noted that Gran was cognitively intact, oriented to time and place, and fully capable of managing her own affairs. 43 days. My father had filed 10 days after that assessment was conducted. The document existed. It was already in the system. That cost me $430 for 2 hours of Rutherford's time. I did not complain. I adjusted my grocery budget, and I did not complain. In the meantime, I kept going to see Gran. I brought the rye crackers. I did not tell her what was happening, not all of it, because she would have been hurt and I did not want her to be hurt. But I told her I was dealing with something. She said, "Is it your father?" I said, "Yes." She said, "He's always been afraid of what he didn't earn." She handed me a tin box. Blue lid. Dented corner. Embossed sailing ship. She said, "Keep this somewhere safe. Don't open it yet. You'll know when." I put it in the glove compartment of my car. I did not open it. My parents called 3 times over the next 2 months. Each call followed the same shape. An opening softness, a pivot to the trust, an offer that required me to stop contesting the conservatorship and agree to a family arrangement. Each time I said no. The 3rd time my mother said, "We're doing this for you, Teddy. So things don't get messy." I said, "Things are already messy. The question is who made them that way." My father's attorney sent a letter characterizing me as a minor with limited understanding of fiduciary responsibility. I had turned 18 4 weeks before that letter arrived. The word minor was already false by the time it was printed. On a Tuesday in November, I arrived at Gran's facility and found her sitting in her chair by the window, and she was looking at the courtyard where a single oak tree had dropped all its leaves, and she was very quiet. I sat with her. I did not need to say anything. She said, "The tree looks better without them." All that weight. I think about that sentence more than I think about almost anything. If you're watching this and you're not subscribed yet, do it now. This story is at the part where everything feels uncertain. where doing the right thing has not yet paid off. I know how this ends. Subscribe so the rest of this story finds you. Gran died in February. Not dramatically. She went to sleep and she did not wake up, which is the death she would have chosen if she had been given a form to fill out. Dr. Krishnamurti called me at 6:40 in the morning. I sat in my car in the parking lot of my apartment building for a long time. The heater was running. The windows fogged slowly from the inside. 3 days later, Rutherford Osei called to tell me that he had received a copy of Gran's original trust documents. Her own copies, not the family's, and that there was a secondary document attached. A codicil. Gran had updated the trust 14 months before she died, with a separate attorney entirely, a woman named Camille Abra, whose office was on the other side of the city. He said, "You're going to want to come in." I came in. The codicil named me as sole beneficiary. It also named Rutherford's firm as the independent trustee. A decision Gran had made before my father filed his petition, before any of this had begun, as if she had looked at the horizon and known what weather was coming. The conservatorship hearing was already scheduled. My father's attorney had subpoenaed Gran's facility records, her financial statements, and 3 months of her medication logs. He had built an argument around her age and her inconsistencies. He had not known about the codicil. He had not known about Camille Abra. He had not known that Gran, who he had dismissed as a difficult old woman in a facility on the east side of town, had made a very quiet, very deliberate decision 14 months ago, and had filed it properly with the county clerk. The day of the hearing, I walked into the courtroom with Rutherford on my left and the tin box in my right hand. My father was already seated. His attorney was, as I mentioned, shuffling papers. My mother was beside him. Marlene and Pete were in the gallery. Cresswell was not there. The judge was a woman named the Honorable Deborah Fitch. She had gray-streaked hair, and the expression of someone who had been lied to so many times that she had developed a very precise instrument for detecting it. Rutherford presented Dr. Krishnamurti's assessment. He presented the original trust documents. He presented the codicil, filed 14 months prior, notarized, witnessed, and registered. He presented the letter from my father's attorney calling me a minor, dated 4 weeks after my 18th birthday. He presented it specifically to call attention to the error. Judge Fitch looked at my father's attorney and said, "Counsel, were you aware of the codicil?" The attorney's hands went still. My father stood up. His chair scraped back and he said loudly that this was a misrepresentation, that Gran had not been competent, that the codicil was the product of manipulation, that I had been poisoning her against her own family for years. Judge Fitch asked him to sit. He said he would not sit. She asked him again. He sat. My mother began to cry. This was the performance of grief, the hands at the face, the small sounds. But across the gallery, Pete was looking at the floor, and his face had the particular expression of a man who has been carrying something for a long time, and has just understood that he cannot put it down because it has become part of him. Judge Fitch dismissed the conservatorship petition. She cited the assessment. She cited the codicil's date of filing. She cited the letter from my father's attorney as evidence of misrepresentation regarding the petitioner's minor status. The word minor had become the instrument of its own undoing. I stood up, because Rutherford nodded at me. I said, "My grandmother told me once that a person's real inheritance is what they learn from people who treated them like they were worth teaching." I put the tin box on the table. I opened it. Inside were 47 handwritten cards. One for every birthday I'd had since I was born, including the 18 I'd had so far, and the ones she'd pre-written for the years after. Each one had a different piece of advice. The last one she'd written, the one for my 21st birthday, said in her handwriting, "You'll be fine. You've always known what to keep and what to let go." I said, "She wrote these. Over 40 years. That's who she was. That's what the trust was for." The conservatorship petition was dismissed with prejudice. My father was ordered to pay a portion of my legal fees, $11,400, under a clause regarding frivolous filings. The trust transferred to my sole control within 45 days of the hearing. $212,000, plus the interest it had accumulated during the proceedings. Before we left the courthouse, I stopped in the hallway and I spoke to my mother. I told her that if she wanted contact with me, the door was not closed, that grief does strange things to people, and I was not without understanding of that. She looked at me for a moment, and then she walked away without speaking. That was her choice. I want to be clear about that too. My father filed a secondary challenge 6 weeks later. Rutherford disposed of it in 3 weeks. My father's attorney withdrew from the case shortly after. I do not know what happened between them and I did not ask. Pete called me once, on a Sunday afternoon in April. He said, "I should have said something at the dinner." I said, "Yes, you should have." And then there was a long pause and he said, "She was a good woman, your grandmother." I said, "She was the best person I've ever known." And I meant it with everything I had. I did not forgive him that day. But I did not close the door either. I still work as a home health aide. I have 3 clients now, and I know their medication schedules, and their preferred breakfast temperatures, and the names of their grandchildren. I have Grand's tin box on my kitchen windowsill. It is the first thing I see when I make coffee in the morning. Last week I made her rye cracker recipe, the ones with the caraway seeds, which I found in her handwriting on a card tucked into the box under everything else. I made them on a Sunday afternoon, and the apartment smelled like something true, and I sat at my small table, and I ate them with a cup of tea, and the window was open, and the light came in at a particular angle that made the dented corner of the tin catch and hold it. The tree looks better without the weight. She was right about that. She was right about most things. If someone in your life is being quietly erased, by paperwork, by procedure, by the kind of cruelty that wears the costume of concern, don't wait for them to ask for help. Check on them today. Learn their doctor's name. Know what they have on file and where. The people who need advocates are often too proud to say so out loud. If this story landed somewhere real for you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment. Subscribe if you haven't. And if you have your own story of quiet justice, I want to hear it. I'll see you in the next one.